Hello and welcome to another episode of Live 605. It's been a while, but we're back. We're back on this rather chilly day here in the Blue Mountains. It's, we've had flurries of snow over the last couple of weeks. That's why I haven't stayed back after school to present one of these. In fact, there have been all sorts of things happening. But I am pleased to say that we are back, and I'm glad that you're joining us. And if you're joining us for the first time, subscribe, hit the notification button, and then once you hit that little bell thing, you will be notified when we're on here. And that's important to all of us, to me, to you, to the whole community. Speaking of community, I'm Con Kazantzidis from The Stray Whisker. We have a Stray Whisker page which you can follow to find out what's happening. Not much has been happening over the last couple of years, I have to say, in terms of world freight and products. But I'm delighted and pleased to say that all of that is about to change. The borders have opened, things are starting to move backwards and forwards, and so consequently you will be seeing more things appear on the shelves, not only in our business, but across the board, with some borders opening. Now, of course, this isn't across all products and all sectors, but it's certainly along ours, and that's the important thing. So, I welcome you to the club. Of course, there is a pun intended. We're going to talk about Clubman and what all the kerfuffle is surrounding Clubman. Do you use Clubman? I'd like to know. Please put a comment below and let me know if you are a Clubman fan. For those uninitiated, welcome to the world of Clubman. Clubman Pinaud, no less. It goes by several names. It's Pinaud Clubman, Clubman Pinaud, just Clubman. But I figured that in talking about these products and whether they're worth while and worthy of your consideration, and also to spell some of the common views on these particular products, because I know that there are a number of you out there that for one reason or another perhaps haven't tried these products. It could be that the opportunity hasn't arisen, or you haven't read good things about them, which I think are completely unjustified. And who they're for. Why would you want to use these Clubman products? I think this is pretty important. But before I do that, I guess it's probably important that you know a little bit about the company and how it began. Of course, it's no secret that it was named after a very, very clever Frenchman, Edouard Pinaud. So let's have a look. If you don't know what these products look like, well, this is it. This is them. They come in these rather retro-looking bottles. I say bottles. They're not in glass, unfortunately. They're a plastic. They come in plastic bottles these days, which has its advantages and disadvantages. Firstly, the advantages are that they're less expensive than if they were in a glass bottle. So that's the first thing. So cost is one of those things. Another thing which is tied up with cost is weight. If these things were shipped around the world in glass bottles that look similar to those that you just saw, then freight costs would go up as well. So not only would you have the cost of putting stuff in a bottle, but you would have the added cost of freight and weight. So I think the company, the current company, has decided that they will continue on using these particular bottles, and just to keep the price point fairly reasonable. Barbers love them. In fact, this is the traditional and the prime example of what a barbershop scent is like. There are very similar notes across the entire range, but of course there are differences with each particular scent, each particular fragrance. So yes, that's them. That's the Pinaud. Let's talk a little bit about them and about the company. We have, of course, the founder, who is Edouard Pinaud. This fine young man, he was a very, very fine young man. In fact, he was born in 1810, I think it is, in just north of Paris, and left home when he was only 13 years of age to find his fortune. He came from a family of merchants, so I would imagine that in those days, in the early 1800s, the Napoleonic years, his family encouraged him to go forth and seek his fortune, and that he did indeed. Now, the extraordinary thing about Edouard is that in no time at all, he managed to team up with a number of Italian perfumers and people and develop what can best be called eau de toilette, or toilet waters, soaps, toilet waters, fragrances. Remember, the 1800s would have been a particularly challenging time when it comes to personal hygiene and smells. We'll just leave it at that. Just imagine, in fact, many would say that people smelt like dirty goats. So fragrance was very, very important, and it was particularly important in France. Now, of course, this wasn't available to all and sundry. There were people of the nobility that could access and acquire these particular products. But in no time at all, in fact, by the age of 20, so he's left home at the age of 13, and by the age of 20, he's established his own perfumery and has hit the world with all sorts of concoctions. This Violette Rien, is a beautiful scent that he made sometime later, after he'd started, for Queen Victoria, no less. And in fact, she loved it so much, he named it after her. He was a very clever man. He was a businessman, of course. Beautiful violets, very understated. It wasn't overpowering, but it was just right. And so the English monarch said, I like it. And it was never, ever absent from the royal court from that day on. So this made Monsieur Pinaud very, 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 very popular indeed. And these shows that would happen in Paris, they were happening since the 1900s, early 1900s, would exhibit, people come, like here in Australia, the Royal Easter Show, where you go out and you exhibit your fine wares, you tell people about what you're doing, and then they're judged and you win medals and all the rest of it. And Edouard Pinaud impressed royalty. In fact, he also impressed Napoleon III, not this Napoleon, but Napoleon III, is responsible for modern-day Paris. And, of course, he loved the stuff as well. And there are many other, famous people that loved Pinaud's products. This is what the Salon looked like. You'll see that it's not too shabby at all. This was in number 18 Place Vendôme. If you've been to Paris, that place still exists. It's a wonderful shopping centre now, and people would go there and sample. And I think there's a table there in the centre of that beautifully appointed neoclassical room, and people would go and sample them. And then, if you liked what you smelled, they would put a bottle together for you, and you'd be out the door, and everyone would be so, jealous of just how wonderful you were going to smell from that point on. This wasn't the only thing he did. He didn't only do perfumes. He also was very, very famous for quinine, which is great. It was a great hair tonic, and this is one of the things that barbers use it for. Very good if you want to, it was great for dandruff and all sorts of things, and conditioning the scalp. And in fact, during the COVID, during COVID, a lot of people, would miss a day or 2 or 3 or 33 and not shampoo their hair. And this would have worked really, really well in keeping that scalp conditioned. It had a beautiful citrusy sort of scent. It's very nice. In fact, I've got some stuff here. This is the Eau de Portugal. You can see that. Just have a look at that. See if we can just show you. The Eau de Portugal, again in that sort of typical bottle. Very, very good, hair tonic. Very inexpensive. So the formulation, lock it in, and that's it. It works. It's popular, and that's essentially how Pinaud made his fortune. Of course, all these stories unfortunately come to a rather sad end. He sort of worked himself to death almost, and a friend of his, Monsieur Meyer, took over and sent the company into. They went from strength to strength and won several medals at several Paris exhibitions and shows, and so their fortune was almost sealed. But of course, poor Edouard Pinaud was no longer around. He'd gone to the great perfumery in the sky. Having said that, of course, Pinaud, the name, then went on, and there still is a Pinaud, not the Clubman Pinaud. We're going to make distinctions soon, but the Pinaud brand makes things like jewellery and watches and some fragrances as well. It was a parent company, but it split, as is always the case with these modern corporations, and Pinaud became an entity in and of itself, and it was acquired by several companies all the way through to 2000. And the products that we are talking about here today, of course, are the barbershop products. Before we go to barbershops, let's go to the famous author Ian Fleming, who, of course, whose character was very, very famous, James Bond. And the Pinaud Company created the Elixir shampoo. And, of course, Ian Fleming incorporated this into his novels. He would say that James Bond used the Elixir shampoo, and this is why he was, absolutely fantastic. Well, let's talk about the modern day Pinaud. Let's talk about essentially these particular scents here. Now, you'll see on the left there is a new range, which they call the Pinaud Reserve. And they're typically a boozy range. You've got whiskey woods and gins, gent, and brandy spice. They've got all sorts of things. They keep coming out with new ones. These are really, really, really effective, and they're very nice, particularly in the cooler months. I find that in the warmer months, the fragrance lasts longer, but it can be quite cloying. And this is the thing. This is, I suspect, the reason some people don't like Pinaud. I think it's great. I think it's a traditional sort of aftershave. It's the sort of when someone comes in and says, "I want an aftershave. I want a splash. I want something with a bit of alcohol in it. I want to get that bracing feeling." I just say, "Here you go. Have some of this." It's very old school. You don't need a lot. You just I know a lot of people like sort of bathing themselves in it, but once it's on your skin, you say, "Yes. This is the aftershave that Granddad used or Dad used." It's that old world kind of beautiful bracing aftershave, which will give you that, that Home Alone kind of feeling with was it Macaulay Culkin? Yes. Anyway, I digress. All of these particular Pinaud aftershaves have certain notes to them. They'll all typically have some sort of citrus note. There's some lavender in there, but they all tend to have this sort of musk-forward, barbershop-y kind of scent. And this is why the barbershop experience, if you want to have a barbershop experience in your place, then you can't go past something like Pinaud. You can't go past it for price, of course, and you also can't go past it for just that old world charm. It hasn't, unlike other formulations, it hasn't changed that much, but there is a caveat, and I will discuss that shortly, which also is a double-edged sword because it's something that some people have resisted because of this. So it hasn't. It typically it smells pretty much has done, since we sat in a barber's chair when I had hair, of course, and he would splash that on, and I would feel, wow, what an experience! This is absolutely magnificent. I'm coming back for this because it smells great. Before I get on to what it is that polarizes people, there's one thing I will say, and that's this fellow here. Now, I don't know if you can see that. It's very, very pink, and it's the Clubman Musk. Let me tell you something. There is nothing pink about this. This is such a beautiful scent. Again, you don't need a lot, right? And it is something that I don't know that I'd be using this in the middle of summer, and if I was, I'd be using it sort of quite, but it'll be a little bit light with it. And of course, a little bit heavier during the winter months, as we're experiencing here. But it is just lovely. It's beautiful. It's really, really good. So let's talk about what it is that might be polarizing people. It is that very thing, that musk-like scent with the citrus, which might put some people off. And I can understand that. This is why I say you don't sort of, splash it on like it owes you money, right? Just go lightly on it. Of course, if you've just shaved your face or your head, just dab it on as you normally would. What I normally do is just put on a little bit of moisturizer. So I finish the shave, rinse off with cool water, moisturizer, let it absorb, and then now the moisturizer, of course, tip should be as fragrance-free as is possible. I know that even fragrance-free things have some fragrance in them to mask all the other ingredients and other agents which are in that particular post-shave balm. Then I allow it to absorb into my skin, and then I take the splash and go nuts with it. Just in your hands and just pat it on there, and you can smell it easily. I mean, I get about 6 to 8 hours, depending on which one I use. The musk one I can smell all day. Even I can even smell it on my hands after I've washed them 3 or 4 times. I've still got that residual scent, and it is beautiful. It's beautiful. Then it's not really like musk lollies if you're worried about smelling like a lolly shop. It's boiled lollies or something. It doesn't really smell like that. On the dry down, it's really quite just powdery and clean and fresh. Okay. I have a bottle here that's been around for some time, which means it's been in this plastic bottle for some time, and I have smelt both a new bottle that's just been cracked open and one that I've had for some time. And there is a slight deterioration in the intensity of the scent, and it also picks up other notes and characters which are probably not the best. So if you're a barbershop, then going for the industrial size makes perfect sense. It makes perfect economic sense. You're using it all the time, and that's great. But if you're buying something like this for home use and you're not going to get through it in the next, look, it says here that you should, 24 months or whatever, and it's right. I'd be using it a lot sooner than that. And especially because it's in a glass bottle. Okay. I mean, in a plastic bottle. If it were in a glass bottle and it were kept in the dark, and I've mentioned this before in other videos, then I would treat things a little bit differently, right? I put all of my aftershaves in a cool, dark place. I don't leave them out in the sun. You certainly wouldn't want to leave any of this Pinaud stuff in the sun. Keep it in a cool, dry cupboard, and the stuff will reward you. Does it deteriorate over time? Yes, it does, and it will. And in a plastic bottle, it'll do that quite uniquely. It'll take on other things. It'll take on other scents and scent profiles. It will alter. So if a mate comes over and says, "Oh, what's that aftershave you got on?" and you pull out a bottle of Pinaud that you've had there for 3 years or 4 years or 5 years, and they make their judgment based on that, I don't know. It could be a little bit. It could be a little bit touch and go. It might be a bit dodgy. Okay. So what do you do? What can you do with that? Well, there are people out there in the world, and you know who you are, that have taken a bottle like this and emptied it out into a clean glass bottle. In other words, they've repurposed a bottle and they put it in a glass bottle, and I shall show you. Here it is, Exhibit A. This is a person that has taken the Clubman Pinaud aftershave lotions and put them in that are Mersol bottles. So these once contained other fragrances. Now, you've got to be very careful when you do that. You've got to make sure that there is absolutely nothing left in that bottle. It needs to be washed thoroughly, really, really thoroughly, because you're going to get some cross-contamination of scents. But I understand this person's sentiment. This person is called Norman Gunston, by the way. So thank you, Norman Gunston. Lives in the western part of the country, in Perth. And Norman Gunston decided that this would be a good idea. And I understand, as I said, I understand the sentiment, because keeping these aftershaves in glass means that they're going to denature and change at a different rate. It has to do with the fluctuations in temperature. Okay, now a plastic bottle can get really, really, really hot really quickly in ambient conditions. Now, of course, so can a glass bottle. We know that. But the glass bottle isn't going to give off certain characteristics that plastic bottles would. So, as I said, I understand the sentiment. I haven't gone to that trouble where I've done that, and I've seen people put them in, those oil and vinegar. You can buy them in homeware stores. No, I just, if I'm going to take gentleman's gin home, I'm going to get through this in the next 10 months or so. It's going to, go to town with it, or at least no more than 2 years. And if I'm going to keep it for 2 years, I'm going to keep it in a cool, dark place. That is important. It's critical, right? As I said, I understand the sentiment of the glass. I know that they'd be great in glass, but they'd be very, very expensive. They wouldn't be what they are in terms of their price point. And so please do not confuse price point in this instance with quality of product. Is it the best product in the world? No, it is not. It is not the best product in the world. Is it the worst product in the world? It is certainly not the worst product in the world. Is it a great product? Great old school product for someone that is looking for an aftershave as a gift or for themselves, or wants to be reminded of their dad, then it's a great product. It's very good. Barbers use it for a reason. When you put it on your face and you feel it on your face, you understand, you say, aha, you have the aha. If you've never used it before, of course. Those of you, if I'm, I don't want to be teaching you how to suck eggs, you all know how this performs. If, if you've used it, there's no point in me getting into that. But it is certainly worthy of your consideration. It's not a cheap and nasty aftershave unless you leave it on a windowsill in scorching heat. So sunlight and heat is going to make it, it's going to challenge the product a little bit, and it will bring to the product characteristics which we're not entirely wanting in this instance. You just want it to be a nice, clean aftershave. The makers of this, I would imagine, are saying, we need to keep this at a price point. We need to make sure that it doesn't change in terms of its scent profile. In other words, when someone smells it, they go, aha, yes, I remember this. So we need to maintain that. But we also don't want to create a disappointing experience for someone that's coming in new to this and hasn't used these products before. My thoughts on the on this Reserve range, I think they're fantastic. I mean, I wore Whiskey Woods the other day. It's just really, really beautiful. It's like it's been aged in a barrel. Oh, yes, an oak barrel or something like that. Remember, keeping it in a cool, dark place will ensure that for as long as possible. And you notice that they're keeping them in size. Okay, so the size is one thing, which means you're going to get through this a lot faster, which is good. It's a good thing, right? Keeps the price down. You're going to get through it a lot faster, unless, of course, you're in a commercial setting. Then you could look at, there are other arrangements that could be made there. The other thing I will say, I've seen people almost drown with this stuff. And by that I mean that when they take off the lid, I don't know whether it gives people the impression that it might be glass, but there seems to be a bit of squeezing that goes on. And I've seen this stuff go up people's nostrils. And I'm sure they're still smelling it today. Yes. It's time for me to go. Thank you for joining us. If you're watching this on replay, thank you. If you're watching it live, what are you doing watching it live? How dare you watch this live? Subscribe, hit the bell, all that sort of stuff. You know how it works. We've done this many, many times before out there in YouTube land. I'll put this out on the other on all other socials, so as other people can be. So I want to be menacing. I want to be menacing. I want this to go as far as possible. Share it with your friends. Tell people about it, and just join the club. Be a clubman. We'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.